It's always my pleasure to speak with members of the law enforcement community. As you know, my father served 2 careers in law enforcement, one on active duty in the U.S. Army, and then a second working for the federal government as a police chief. And so I feel a special bond with law enforcement, and I know that they not only protect and serve, but they investigate and they perform a unique service to our country. And I know that there are always going to be a bad apple or two in any profession, so no one's perfect. I don't idolize them. I rather respect them for the work that they do. It's a calling, and only police officers know what they're going through, they and their families, what it means to protect and serve in communities across this country. And so it's always a pleasure to have someone here to talk about the details and to kind of unpack the nuances and help us to have a better understanding. Sergeant Betsy Smith is spokesperson for the National Police Association. The website is nationalpolice.org, nationalpolice.org. Sergeant Smith, thank you for coming on tonight.
Stacy, thanks so much for having me, and I so appreciate you as a cop's kid. I've got 4 kids, and I'm going to guess you went through a lot of those same things that my kids did in having a police officer for a parent.
I think it was kind of like when you're a kid, you're like, geez. But then as an adult, I feel like it was a privilege because I've learned so much just from that. I didn't know I was learning at the time, but I learned a lot about the way it is for people who have these first responder jobs, not just law enforcement officers, but, firefighters. But, firefighters have not come under the same kind of scrutiny that our law enforcement officers have over the past few years. And the attacks have been brutal and unfounded and completely out of proportion with the things that have happened that have kind of caused this firestorm. So you have a very unique story that you're bringing to us tonight. You have one of Minnesota's public university systems ordering its schools to remove any and all references to the words, quote, law enforcement, close quote. How ridiculous is this?
Well, it's just silliness, and it comes out of this post-George Floyd hysteria, especially in Minnesota, where, of course, remember at first we had calls to absolutely disband the Minneapolis Police Department, and then the state of Minnesota got involved with police training, and they said, okay, we've got to get rid of something they called warrior trainers. So, and I happen to be one of those. So police trainers who teach the ethos, the habits, the values of what we call warriors. What are those ethos, those habits? Duty, honor, courage, loyalty, strength, selfless service. Isn't that what people want from their law enforcement officers? But the state of Minnesota decided that, for example, warrior police trainers were dehumanizing the public to police officers. So they started with that, and now they've gone into some of the public universities, and one of them is Hennepin Technical College, and they happen to teach at least 2/3 of the police officers in the state. Now they're demanding that they remove the words law enforcement from all their signage, from their curriculum, from their business cards. And it's just become insane. They're taking nomenclature and trying to use it to change reality.
So let's get down to the basics then, shall we, Sergeant Smith? Because I think you kind of perked my interest when you said warrior ethos. I think that is actually something that all young men should go through. It helps them to understand their role in society, but I digress. We're talking law enforcement here. So I just like to find out, like when they want to ban a word or ban a phrase, I always like to find out why they want to ban it. And it usually goes to what the word stands for, the meaning of it, the specific definition. So for law, it's the system of rules which a particular country or community recognizes as regulating the actions of its members, and which it may enforce by the imposition of penalties. So law is something that Democrats and leftists and these woke mobs actually hate. They hate being told that they can't burn your house down if they don't like something you posted on Facebook, or they can't remove you from your workplace or tear down a statue of someone that they don't actually know the history of, like Columbus. But now I want to know what enforcement means. So the definition of enforcement is the act of compelling observance of or compliance with a law, rule, or obligation. So these lawless criminals want to remove the very terminology that goes against what they want to do.
That's exactly it. And so when you can look at a police officer and say, well, okay, we're not going to call you a law enforcement officer anymore. We're not going to train you in law enforcement things. We're going to call you a peace officer. Okay, here's the thing. I was a cop for 29 years, Stacy. Sometimes I had to make peace or get people to be peaceful. Sometimes I had to enforce the law. Sometimes I delivered babies. Sometimes I went to a kid's school and gave a talk. Police officers do, as you know, so many different things. And by removing 2 words from someone's curriculum, police academy, business card, whatever it is, isn't going to change the role of law enforcement, and it's not going to encourage people to not break the law.
Not only will it not, have the intended effect, but peacekeeping, that has become almost like it's vilified, right? UN peacekeepers, everybody thinks bad things about them. It feels like an impotent Gestapo that comes in to foreign countries where they don't belong to take the place of the legitimate law enforcement officers. So to basically take the police and say, instead of the police, instead of law enforcement, they are now peacekeepers. There's still an element of law enforcement to keeping the peace, because in order for things to be peaceful, people cannot be breaking the law. So I don't know where they're going with this, because they end back invariably at the same spot where they began.
Well, and they absolutely do. And part of this anti-police wokeness that is going on in states like Minnesota, remember, it's all very anti-American. It's anti-family. It's, we were built on Judeo-Christian values, and those Judeo-Christian traditions are the absolute foundation of our legal system. And we can't get away from that, nor should we, by changing certain words. But what's happening, and this is what's happening in Minnesota, is they're just saying, well, the words law enforcement are racist. They don't relate it back to anything racial of those 2 words, but they say it's racist. They say it makes people uncomfortable, whether it's people in class or people who are attending that same college studying something else. And so they're demanding, this isn't even under discussion, they're just absolutely demanding that all these changes made so that we're not triggering people. And so frankly, what's happening, of course, we already know we have a recruiting crisis in the law enforcement profession nationwide. And what they are seeing specifically in Minnesota is they're seeing record numbers of retirements, people leaving before they can retire, and they are unable to replace them with new young people. And it's incredibly frustrating. Just about 6 weeks ago, my husband and I were training at the Minnesota Sheriff's Conference, and the sheriffs, they get it. We see the difference in sheriffs, and often police chiefs who are appointed by far-left city councils and mayors. And the sheriffs in Minnesota are incredibly frustrated because they're having to deal with these recruitment and retention issues created by what's happening in the legislature and in the urban areas. And, of course, we're seeing this throughout the country.
Yeah, it's disturbing, but I also I want to highlight that changing the words. So police are already under attack, and so if they give in to this and change the language, it's just seen as another another bend, another give to these really evil forces. And I'm not trying to say that there aren't some well-meaning people within these groups where they're like, well, that triggers people, or they feel this or they feel that. But they're also not the ones who are living in crime-ridden neighborhoods where they want more police. Study after study shows that the very people that these woke leftist mobs claim they're representing, minorities, all minorities, especially blacks, want more police in their neighborhoods, more opportunities to interact with the police so that they can have safer streets. They don't want name changes. They know that won't do anything to make them safer. So this doesn't really help anyone.
Well, it doesn't, and you are absolutely correct. The polling that we do and the polling that other organizations have done find out that most people, regardless of color, regardless of their area, when they're in a lower socioeconomic neighborhood where there's high crime, they don't want their police defunded. In fact, they want their police to have a more funding. They want more police officers, because what's happening, Stacy, is safety is becoming regional in this country. So if you have the means to get out of an urban area that's high crime, for example, 2 of my adult children in the last 2 years moved out of the city of Chicago. They had the means to do that. But if you don't have the means or the wherewithal to be able to do that, you are stuck in a high crime neighborhood with a mayor with political leadership, for example, in the city of Chicago, who doesn't really seem to care about the onslaught of violent crime and just wants to talk about guns and do TikTok videos. So what's happening is safety is becoming regional. And the problem is, in the United States of America, people who don't feel safe aren't truly free. And we are losing our freedoms of speech, like we're talking about now, and we're also people are losing their freedoms to be able to move about freely in their neighborhoods because of the increase in crime.
Yeah. And so the people who most want better interactions with law enforcement are subject to less law enforcement in their communities because of the bad actions by these individuals who they don't speak truth and they don't speak on behalf of marginalized communities at all. They're really just activists searching for their next opportunity to maybe get onto MSNBC or something.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And you know, it's easy to say I want less police if you live in a wealthy, gated community with private security and you can afford a terrific alarm system for your house and all that. Then it's easy to say, oh my gosh, the police are bad. But if you're living in a gang-infested, crime-ridden neighborhood and you're just trying to go to work, get your kids to school, and survive another day, you need the police, and the police want to be there to help protect you, but they are beleaguered. They are tired of being vilified and lied about and called racist, and so they're leaving the profession altogether, or they're going to states like Florida that are more welcoming to the profession.
So, bully for Florida, awesome. We all love Florida, but we need police everywhere. We need police to live in places that aren't as popular, like Chicago, St. Louis. We need police in all of our communities. And so I just encourage people, again, if you see an officer out at the gas station, grocery store, wherever, just go up to them and shake their hand and tell them thank you. Thanks for what you do. I know it's not much, but you never know how much that might lift their spirits, and you don't know what kind of day they've had. And just having a thank you from some stranger could mean a huge difference to them. And that's where you can start. There's other things you can do. To talk to us, Sergeant Smith, tell us what you would recommend our listening audience do if they want to thank police officers and maybe lend them some support.
Well, first of all, exactly what you said. You have no idea how wonderful it is as a police officer to have someone come up and say, thank you for what you do, or we sure appreciate your service, or buy you a cup of coffee, or just even smile and wave as you see a police officer drive by in a patrol car. And we also encourage people to go to our website, nationalpolice.org. That's why we exist. We're not a police union. We're not an association for you to join. We are an organization that helps people who appreciate law enforcement learn about how they can help their police departments both locally and nationally. We do education for the community. We do legal advocacy in various situations. We have a national video podcast called the NPA Report. And we have a team of writers where you can learn so much about the positives of law enforcement. We put out articles every day on our social media, on Facebook and Twitter, talking about just some of the incredible things that cops do. Everything from, saving lives to adopting abandoned dogs and everything in between. Most of the positive police stories don't get told. But when a police officer does something wrong, and of course, like you said, in every profession, there is going to be that bad apple. But that story goes on for weeks and weeks, and yet police officers every single day do absolutely amazing things. And we do it at the sacrifices of our family and our sleep and our time and our physical health, and sometimes, yes, our lives. So we ask people to go to nationalpolice.org, find out what you can do to let your local law enforcement know that you really do care about them and want to support them.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that with us and just for taking time out to come on the show this evening. We really appreciate your time, Sergeant Betsy Smith.
Stacy, thank you so much, and I'm a big fan. I'm a listener, so I'm just very excited to talk to you.
Okay, that's really great to hear. I was so excited to see you come on my calendar today. I'm like, I'm gonna have a good time talking to her. So wonderful to hear that. Thank you for being a part of our SiriusXM Nation, and also for all that you do for the National Police Association. Really appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Have a great night. She's a spokesperson for NPA at Sergeant Betsy Smith on Twitter.